call May meeting of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission to order. We call the roll, please.
Sure. Councilmember Eaton.
Here.
Commissioner Hookham.
Here.
Commissioner Peleg.
Here.
Commissioner Mirsky.
Here.
Commissioner Clevey.
Here.
Chair Appleyard.
Here.
And Commissioner Schreiberg.
Here.
All right.
Thank you. I'll call for an approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda? I should mention that we're not sure exactly when the Pioneer High School folks are going to show up, so we may shift things around a little bit to meet their needs, so they don't have to sit around too long. But other than that, I think, unless there's something else that someone else would like to add, I'll call for an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Approval of the minutes. Minutes from 3:13. Anybody see any changes in the minutes?
Are they in here?
Well, it's not mine.
Yeah, they're online.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing none, I'll call for an approval of the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
On to public input.
Abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh,
Abstaining on that.
you're abstaining, okay. Seeing no public, we will call the public part of this closed. Those who aren't here do have a chance to speak at the end of the meeting if they show up. On to the energy report.
So on Sunday, May 20th, from 1 to 5 p.m., we have the 38th Huron River Day. $5 for canoe and kayak rentals. So you guys should all show up. There's also live music. As well as GLREA is having a regional fair in Highland Park. The name of the fair is Energy, Sustainability, and Tech. It's May 12th at 11 to 4 p.m. There's going to be sessions on solar financing, sustainability, and technology. And the event is free and has free food and refreshments as well. So another thing to show up to. Some internal news. Honeywell, I think Nate might have mentioned this in another of our meetings. Honeywell is doing an energy audit on 14 of our buildings. They have completed that energy audit. There seems to be a lot of good opportunities. We have old boilers that we could basically replace. There's a lot of opportunities for energy efficiency and upgrades, as well as renewables. So we had them also look at renewables. We added the water treatment plant as well as another facility, since those would be rather large.
Good.
They found about 1.3 megawatts of potential. So that's, that's not bad for 14 buildings, or I guess 16, plus a water treatment plant. And besides that, so we're going to continue to meet with them and see what the possibilities are for, again, doing some of these energy efficiency upgrades to our buildings and the potential for renewables, with the water treatment plant being basically the largest of the systems. There's also, we're looking at landfill as a potential as well. So we've been in talk to find out what kind of solar potential a landfill has. It was discovered that there is a extinct, or I guess close to extinct bird habitat, the bobolink.
I think it's just threatened species.
Threatened?
It's not,
Okay.
it's not endangered
I knew
or.
those bobblings were there.
Oh, yeah? Okay. So we do have an in-house ornithologist who studies such things. So they're out basically studying what the potential is and what a path forward would be for solar at the landfill. But that's kind of, I guess, internal news.
Would those be done on a shared savings contract or no?
I'm sorry,
The Honeywell upgrades, have they been on a shared savings contract with Honeywell, or would we
currently
pay them out, or?
currently they're just looking at the potential. So we only had them looking at energy efficiency and renewable potential. So that's where kind of we're at now, the contract with them.
We're not obliged to use them going forward, I think.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Might be fun to look at that stuff.
Yeah, it's a very, very thick binder with lots of information, so it's good. A lot of data.
Is it available for viewing?
Yeah, we could probably, it's very large, so, you know, if you want to sit down, we can arrange
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah, it'd be
Cool.
A
fun
few
to look
nerds
at.
of us here
Yes.
would like to do that.
Yeah, sure. There's also a pilot program with EV charging that's going on between the DDA and DTE. There's an RFP that went out. It's on Detroit and 5th. It'd be on-street parking, it's metered. And there's also a RFP that just went out for the chargers themselves. So it'd be 2 fast chargers and 1 level 2 charger.
Right.
Yeah,
Outstanding.
so all good stuff.
These are not the chargers that are going into the lot, right? With the solar rooftop or solar canopy?
No, this is
different.
just, this is just
In
Detroit
addition
and
to.
5th, yeah.
The chargers are already in the lot, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
That's true.
neighboring lot.
Other news? I did see that the MPSC approved the 1,100 megawatt natural gas fired DTE plant over our objections. But that's too bad. It's going to produce something on the order of 1.5 times 10 to the 8th megatons of carbon dioxide over its 35-year life, if it lives that long, which is pretty significant. But here we are. Other news. You got anything, Mike? No?
No?
I think one last thing
Sure.
about the energy report, it's being delivered by Josh, who's now a full-time employee.
Yeah.
Which is our first Energy Commission meeting where he's not been a seasonal employee, so
Yes.
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yes. Welcome
Welcome.
aboard. Okay,
I think tradition has it, or you can start a new tradition to start bringing donuts and
Just let me know what you like.
okay, moving right along, the Washtenaw County millage. John, are you,
So, yeah, I think I'm on board for this. So, the Environmental Commission considered and passed a resolution in support of millage funds going to 40, there's a rebate from the millage. First of all, 38% goes to Washtenaw Community Mental Health Department for mental health crisis stabilization and prevention, and just basically to generally meet mental health needs. There's another 38% of the millage funds that are going to the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, and then there's finally another 24% that is being rebated to jurisdictions which already maintain their own police forces. Last year, council passed a resolution stating that the city intended to use that 24% rebate for climate action, pedestrian safety, and affordable housing. There are individuals, residents in the city that are advocating that the 24% rebate should go to mental health purposes and not to climate action. I think the request is actually that 20% go to pedestrian safety, 40% to affordable housing, and the climate action portion of the rebate would go to mental health. The Environmental Commission wanted to reinforce and support the resolution passed last year by council, including the 40% going to climate action. And the resolution that is in front of us this evening is the same resolution that was passed with one negative vote by Ann Bannister, with the only changes to the language being the Energy Commission is substituted for the Environmental Commission. So this is the same resolution that was passed a couple of weeks ago in the Environmental Commission meeting. Yeah, I'll just leave it in there. I have other comments later if someone wants to. So I guess I put this up for discussion, and I guess we need another motion, or need motion to put this into discussion, and then we need a second, right?
I second.
That's correct. Okay, discussion. Commissioner Hookham.
Just a quick question. Is there any reason why we would not find an avenue for public to give us direction on this matter? I mean, it's one thing to have a millage be passed by citizens who think it's for mental health without any discussion, and then to disperse the funds in a different way. I'm fine with dispersing it for different reasons, but should the public be on board with it?
So I can let others talk to the details. Jack or others may know more details, but there was a poll. I don't have the results of the poll in front of me that was taken. It had roughly a plus minus 6%, I think, confidence or accuracy level. The results of the poll indicated by a wide margin that those polled felt that the funds from the millage should go to mental health. I think only 10% of the respondents indicated that it should go to climate action. What I would just say add to that, or indicate as a point of clarification. I spoke with two people behind this move to move the funds from climate action to mental health. Yesterday morning, we met for about an hour and a half, and we co-signed a letter to Councilman Eaton and Councilman Bannister. But one of the things that was clear to me was even the two of them did not know that Ann Arbor had a formal climate action plan with targets, that it was unanimously passed by council, that council had failed to fund any of the action in the climate action plan. And my belief is that those that are responding to the poll probably also were unaware of that. And another thing that I learned is that the general fund already includes $1.3 million going to social services, to a variety of different nonprofits primarily. Whereas right now, there's no, as we know, as I just mentioned, no sustainable funding source for climate action. So I'll stop for a second and let others chime in.
Yeah, I'd just add to that. I mean, look, that was what we call a push poll, right? So that poll was intended to get to that that outcome. Because I read the poll, and as someone who, actually, Ann Arbor had a very transparent debate before the millage. You'll see the date that it was passed, which other communities didn't do, that said exactly how the money would be assigned. So there was no sort of secret piece on this. But the poll basically said, this millage was passed for mental health. Do you believe it should go to mental health? I mean, I actually probably would have answered that question as something that was against the money going for climate. So I would disregard that poll because it was designed for a political outcome. I've done academic survey research that would pass the bias test in the first set. So, but I do think the public had good input. There was no secret that this is where that small portion of the rebate money was going. So I'm not sure I see another need. I'd be very interested in Councilman Eaton's views. I know you've been outspoken against the climate funding on this one.
First, I want to make clear that I'm not against climate funding. I am against using millage money from the mental health and public safety millage for purposes not related to those subjects. Secondly, the polling that was done by Public Policy Polling. It's a scientific firm. It's well respected. I have it here if you want to read the questions. It was not what you would typically call a push poll. And they found that 59% who voted in this election were unaware that there would be this rebate amount. Now, there were paragraphs of text right on the ballot if you read your whole ballot, but most people don't. They read the title, and the title was Mental Health and Public Safety Millage. The second thing I want to point out is that we're not going to collect any of those funds until December of this year. So we won't have them until next year. And the city administrator has already noted that he's not going to spend much of that money until fiscal year 2020, which starts in July of 2019, a year out. So we haven't made any decisions. In the interim, out of just general fund money, we're going to spend $75,000 to develop a plan as to how we go forward on our climate plan, or climate action plan, which is really where we should be starting. So in that poll, 59% indicated they were unaware that money from that millage would be used for purposes other than what was in the title. 16% said they were only vaguely aware that it might be used for other purposes. That's a pretty substantial number out of the 40-some% said that had they known that money was going to be diverted to purposes other than what was in the title of the ballot measure, that would have changed their vote. It is significant to me. This group has a single interest, and you should. You're supposed to advise council on energy issues. Council members, such as myself, have every interest, and we have to balance those issues. And so when I was against the millage before it was on the ballot, when it was on the ballot for consideration, it was because I didn't like this idea of diverting money. We're going to collect $5.1 million in Ann Arbor each year, and $2 million of that is going to be rebated to the city for purposes of our choosing. I opposed it because I thought a more narrowly drafted ballot measure could address this at a lower millage rate, and that would have been my preference. When we passed the resolution allocating our rebate for the various functions that are unrelated to mental health and public safety, I voted against that because we were jumping the gun. We don't have a plan as to how we're going to spend that $900,000 each year. We're just allocating $900,000, and then we're going to go forward and try to spend that. We're talking about 8 years of $900,000 per year, and we don't actually have a map of how we're going to spend that money. Is $900,000 in a given year enough? Is it too much? How can you know this far in advance how much you actually want to spend in any given calendar year, years out? So rather than identifying an action item, planning on how to accomplish the goal, and then allocating the resources necessary to do that, we're just setting a total amount of money that we're going to spend each year. And I think that's backwards. That's how we ended up with the silly fountain in front of this building, is that we allocated how much money we're going to spend on art, and we ended up looking for art that would fulfill the amount of money that we had budgeted. It's a bad way to budget. So in 2012, the city adopted its climate action plan, and I admit that we have done precious little since that to accomplish anything in that document. The plan's 188 pages long. I can assure you that almost none of my council colleagues have read all 188 pages. I'm going to tell you that I think it's our responsibility at this table to pull something out of that plan, describe how you accomplish it, set that goal, and ask staff to tell us how much that goal will cost, and send it to council and ask for them to fund it, as opposed to asking council to come up with $900,000 and then look for ways to fund, to spend that money. I've been sitting on council since 2013, and I've seen precious few items come out of this commission as to advising the council as to how we accomplish the goals that are described in the 2012 plan. I've never seen any suggestion that we put solar on any particular building or any particular site. I've never seen a suggestion that we buy a particular kind of vehicle rather than another to reduce our carbon footprint. I've never seen a particularized plan that identified a goal and a cost and made that request of council. And I'd contrast that with the work of, say, the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission, which in the last 5 years has both completely rewritten the Human Rights Ordinance and gotten that passed by City Council, and has engaged in a years-long process of getting us a police oversight board and getting that funded. I really urge you to push harder on the council with particularity rather than a blanket approach. I would compare our climate action plan to the affordable housing plan that the city adopted. The affordable housing plan says we need 140 units of affordable housing added to our stock every year. We're 3 years into that. We've added 18 units because there's been no follow-up to say, this is what we should do, this is how much it's going to cost, and we need you to fund it. This is what we should be doing here. I understand that it's very attractive to look at a source of funding and say, we'll have no trouble finding ways to spend that. But I think that's the opposite of what responsible budgeting is. For me, I have to weigh a variety of different issues when I budget funds. And if you come to me with a valid idea, a good plan, and a budget, I will fight to fund that. But I haven't seen that. Similarly, the City Council, at your urging, passed the 2030 commitment. And yet, since we passed that, I think a year or more ago, we've had no suggestion as to any particular item that we could do to further that goal. Are we going to get to 2025 and go, well, we'd better do something because 2030 is just around the corner? So it's nice to have the broad plan that describes a lot of things to do, but if we don't, from this body, kick out a particular idea with a plan and a price, then we're going to get into this conflict over how we fund the 2012 plan. So I want you to know that I do support spending $75,000 this year to develop a plan as to how we go forward. But I will continue to say that the spending of the $900,000 should be part of the overall budget process, where I have to weigh that priority against my desire to address human trafficking and prostitution, my desire to address the opioid crisis that is throughout Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County, the whole state actually, and a variety of other demands that come to council. And so it's not that I'm against climate action funding, it's that I'm against writing a blank check and waiting to see how it's spent. And so I hope that you can understand that. I understand you're going to pass this resolution, and that's fine, but I want you to understand that I'm not against attacking probably what's our biggest issue of our life, climate action. But it's going to take some particulars to move it forward. We just can't throw money at it and expect that it will resolve itself. We have to identify what's next. What's the next increment in our road to what we eventually want to accomplish? The whole 188 pages of the 2012 plan.
Commissioner Mirsky, I'll let you go first.
So I'll try to be brief. If I may be direct, you're wrong in at least 2 counts. First of all, I'll speak for myself. Because I sit on Energy Commission does not mean that I'm a one-dimensional person. I take into account a lot of different issues. I am progressive in many regards. I support with my votes as well as my donations. I'd be happy to show you my donations. They go to a wide range of different causes, including environmental, but also social causes, human rights, lots of other things. So just because I or others sit on this commission does not make us one-dimensional. Secondly, in December or in January of 2016, 2017, a group of energy commissioners, environmental commissioners, and people that serve on the Ann Arbor Climate Partnership put together a detailed plan on how climate funding should be considered in the fiscal year 18 budget. That was sent to every council person, including yourself, as well as the administrator. It recommended 5 programs, totaling expenditures of ranges were given on what would be spent of $750,000 to roughly, by memory, $1.2 million a year. Those 5 programs were solar for all, electrification of transportation, energy efficiency, a neighborhood grants program, and there was a Rain Ready program. The Rain Ready program was withdrawn because we felt that would be funded by the stormwater assessment in millage. The only funds that were approved by council were $100,000 for a neighborhood grants program. We requested 25. That was the request was that that would be directed primarily to climate action. This was a climate action package. The $100,000 is a great program. It was in this year's budget as well as in next year's, but it is a broad-based neighborhood grants program. When the recommendation failed to get any kind of support in the fiscal year 18 budget, and I'd be happy to mail it to you again. I have it. I've got both together. We and we understood that when supporters on council recommended that 40% of the rebate, not a diversion, but of the rebate would be allocated to climate action. We presented in the fall of last year another presentation refining the original recommendation, recommending that $600,000 a year go to energy efficiency programs, $250,000 a year to essentially e-mobility and mobility electrification, and $50,000 a year to community or solar for all programs, both community solar as well as residential solar programs. So we have developed and provided to city administration as well as council detailed plans on what we do. We are continuing to work on detailing those plans. City staff presented about 6 weeks ago in an Ann Arbor Climate Partnership meeting additional programs on how they want to spend that money. We have gone and benchmarked or gone to ACEEE, that's a nonprofit or an association that is promotes energy efficiency in the American economy. They have benchmarked programs for energy efficiency across the country, including ordinances and so on and so forth. The intention is to adopt and adapt those to Ann Arbor. So I would say, in contrast to your recollection, we have indeed come with specific programs. I would also be happy to mail you a list of accomplishments from last year from the Energy and from also the Environmental Council in terms of different kinds of things that we were doing. One of which was, for example, the revival of the Green Fleets program, which was allowed to lapse by council and by the administration because there was a policy that was in place with a goal of reaching a certain amount of mileage improvement by the end of 2012. That was reached, and the whole policy was just simply ignored and dropped after that point. So in contrast to what you said, actually this group has done a fair amount. I'll let others chime in.
So if I may,
Yes.
I want to apologize if I conveyed that I believed you were one-dimensional. I was speaking in your role as a member of the Energy Commission. You do have one responsibility with regard to this group, as opposed to my role as a city council member, because as a human being, I have greater interest than just the politics. I have a variety of commissions that I answer to. Then I'd also like to respond that the so-called plan for spending that we received last January actually had broad descriptions. They didn't have particular plans. So it didn't say it will cost us this amount of money to accomplish this particular thing, but rather let's devote this amount of money to this broad topic. And it did come in late in that particular budget year. If you want the city administrator to be your champion on that, it's going to have to come in sooner, which is what I think he's doing with the $75,000 this year.
Right.
So when I say with particularity, I really mean don't give me 4 groups of programs and a lump sum for each one of those broad areas. What I'm saying is show me what a residential energy audit program would look like and what it would cost us to offer it to our community and ask us to fund that. And so I'm not arguing that you haven't again and again come to us with proposals on how to spend a lot of money. I haven't seen the particulars as to how that would happen. And I think that the administrator is going to pick up the slack on that. He's got plenty of staff now to do that. And this $75,000 is going to go to that. But to say that what you presented to council kind of mid-budget process last year was a particularized plan is just going to be a difference of opinion.
Well, let me, you stated we did not provide anything. I'm just saying that we did.
Well,
And we did not receive feedback when we provided the plan in January. I mean, the budget was not voted on until May. So if there was an expectation or requirement that we say exactly break down the funds by program, indicate what the measurables were going to be. By the way, we did provide measurables with some of the outcomes that we were going to track. Then we did not receive that feedback. We did receive the feedback later in the year, but we did not receive it immediately in January.
it's a lot of work for the feedback, and that really is staff work. So when you present something like that, we should probably be starting working on that now for December.
And that's what we're doing.
Because that's the only way we're going to get the city administrator to include it in his budget.
Unfortunately, I would like to point out, sorry for dominating the discussion, but the key staff member for doing that has resigned, is now working for the University of Michigan, and the requisition for that position has not even been initiated. And the person turned in their resignation roughly a month ago, more than a month ago. So
I don't have any control over that. If I ask about personnel issues, I'm accused of being a micromanager, and so I would urge you to talk to Howard.
I've sent an email to Craig Hupy and Crescent Slaughton. I've sent an email to Howard. I talked with him a week and a half ago. I meet with him again tomorrow.
I think his time will become a little more available right after the budget passes. But yes, I understand your frustration.
Yeah.
And we have a number of important positions that are not filled right this moment, including his assistant.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to reiterate the point that Commissioner Mirsky was saying. You're portraying this as funding in search of programs, but it's actually the opposite. We've had programs that are well outlined. There's a funding source that's explicitly for this by the vote of council. I know you were on the other side of that vote, but that was the vote of council. So it seems disingenuous to then say that funding should be diverted elsewhere. I mean, that's my own take on that.
Commissioner Cleaver.
Thank you. So I don't mind the one-dimensionality of being on the Energy Commission, so I think we've got enough to do here, and getting that accomplished, I think, is the main goal, and I look forward to your guidance on how we can sharpen our swords and get this done. One area that I think perhaps you're not aware of that we spent a fair amount of time on was looking at the capital improvements project program, how decisions get made for funding at your level and in the administration, and looked at reviewed a whole list of projects, things that have been funded before, met with the staff, looked at the allocation of how the decisions are made, how points are allocated, and things like that. And it was clear from our analysis of this is the way that the decision gets made, that sustainability and energy efficiency and those things just get short-shifted in the process. A roof can be bid for a fire station. No one asked the question, should we insulate that roof or should we put solar on at the time of the roof? And if we did that, how it would change the project, or look at the fact that if it increased the project, the solar energy would actually pay for the roof over time, and the additional energy efficiency measure would cut the operating budget of that fire station and providing a net savings. That question doesn't get asked because of the way the CIP process is done. We had very specific recommendations about how to fix that, including providing bonus points for projects that benefit the sustainability plan, asking the person who is asking for money from the city to go and look at the climate action plan, identify how the climate action plan will be, the goals will be met by doing a project a very specific way and actually giving bonus points, because it was clear that the people who are in charge of the scoring system as it is now don't want to change it. So while there is a sustainability points that are awarded, in the end, they make very little difference, and most people don't even go after those points because they don't need to. So one area that I know that this recommendations went to the council, the report went to the council, the recommendations went to the council. We met with the administration, met with everybody involved, and as far as I know, nothing has been done and no bonus points have been awarded or any changes in how the CIP process does. So that in the budget process, it's hard to make a specific recommendation on allocating money for sustainability when most sustainability things happen in how we spend money on a daily basis. These lights, all these things, we make decisions all the time, and one of the quickest ways where we could get people to start reading the climate action plan and stuff like that is to say, you have to, if you want these bonus points, if you want your project funded, then here's how you do it. And I think if anybody had the single answer for how we're going to solve climate change risks, we'd wrap a budget around it and bring it forward. It's a process, it's a dynamic process that we have to do together. And one of the fastest things we do is orient the CIP process accordingly. The other piece is that we have a solar program going forward. In December 2015, the council was told that we're not meeting any of our climate action plan goals. In January, we launched a solar subcommittee and came up with a plan. The answer we got back was, well, it's out of the budget. You have to do it under existing funding, which meant we had to go out and find a way to run a program with no money. It doesn't surprise me that it wasn't as successful as we had all hoped. But our goal was, because we did an analysis of the climate action plan and the emissions reductions, and we came up with a target of 2.4 megawatts a year, or 24 megawatts, by the target date. So we had those, and I guess it seems hard to me to believe that we could come in with a plan for 24 megawatts for the city and they would agree to fund it when we can't even get them to agree to ask a fire station or anybody else who asks for money to work on the capital improvements, whether or not there is an energy efficiency or sustainability component to their project. So I think it would help a lot. It would be easier for us to do our job, and I think doing it with sharper pencils, I look for your guidance on how to do that. But it'd be easier if we, we're all working, singing out of the same songbook, because the fire station doesn't care what the Energy Commission does, and apparently no one has told them that they should.
So I agree with you that actually the CIP is where we should be, because every light bulb we buy,
Every light bulb we buy.
and so I only have a vague memory of getting that report. And if you've ever looked at a city council agenda, there's like 30 to 40 items that we receive, and there's no guarantee that council members are reading that. And so what we should probably do is work on a resolution to urge two things. First of all, that we enhance the points that you get for sustainability, but also that our staff member is part of that CIP ranking process. Because if our guy is at the table when they're adding or subtracting points, or even just pondering the next project, that's how you get, first of all, a heads up as to what's coming.
So our guy was at the project. Nate was part of the committee.
He was.
But he was, he had a bully pulpit. But ultimately, he could deliver nothing, because the way the points are allocated, you don't need the sustainability points. And projects have to come in under a sustainability framework. It's a specific project. We want a sustainability thing. And a fire station putting on a new roof doesn't fall under sustainability unless someone says, boy, if you're going to put a new roof on, perhaps you should have an insulated roof, and have you thought about solar? In that case, it would come under sustainability.
All right.
But we said, and we'd be happy to share the report with you
I think
again.
we've gotten a little off track here.
Let me send
because
it.
we
But
have a
just
resolution.
one follow-up thought to that is that too often the city defines sustainability in such a vague manner that we're not actually always talking about energy when we're talking about sustainability.
Sustainability is
And so they can get points if it somehow has something to do with affordability or something. But this is a topic that maybe we should have a work session, invite Howard to, and discuss with him, ask him rather than tell him how we get energy efficiency as a consideration as in every expenditure we make.
Well, with the resolution that you folks passed last year requiring that, it should happen.
Well, it only requires a solar potential analysis.
Right.
It doesn't require solar implementation or renewable implementation, and it only requires LEED Silver, which is basically adherence to current ASHRAE energy efficiency standards.
And
So it's really,
It's actually only for new construction. So
well,
if we
it's
build
for
a new.
major renovation.
Yeah, okay.
And major renovation.
Anyway.
It was wildly weak. I noted it when we discussed it. Because we should actually not just be looking at what we're doing next, but actually considering what to do next based on, I think that we should be installing solar on our rooftops and on our parking structures without regard to whether it has some other renovation going on. Just because that's what we should be doing. And the administrator has promised that he's going to go back and look at that aspect of evaluating what the capital projects that we already have in existence and maintain for renovations that are solely for energy components. So, but back to your, I'm sorry to have hijacked you there.
Okay,
Sarah wanted to say something.
unless there's any.
Sarah wanted to say something,
Oh,
I think.
make it brief.
It's barely relevant anymore, but to draw it back to
That didn't stop any of the rest.
well, it's too relevant. It doesn't relate to the the new topic of conversation. But to draw it back to the resolution, I hear in your discussion that you're you're saying that we have to split our priorities between mental health and energy and environment, and it's a really difficult equivalence to compete against because, as we all know, in the energy and climate realm, it's really difficult to define rate of return. And so I know that it's sexy to support mental health issues because you can see in the next 5 to 10 years the effects that's having on your community. And it's much more difficult to concretely measure how funding for climate action will make a short-term impact in our community. But it's equally, if not more, critical to be using our funds to support climate action at this time. And as someone who plans on being around here for a long time, I'd ask you to consider also supporting this resolution.
Okay, without further ado, I'm going to bring this to a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention.
Not that matters much.
Moving right along.
Can we, before we move along, because I think frankly, a number of topics were touched here that are absolutely core to the commission. And I agree with Councilman Eaton. The proof is in the pudding. And the pudding is that we have accomplished very little in terms of direct line of sight. We initiated this and in the Energy Commission, and here is the direct outcome. We've passed resolutions, we've made recommendations that Josh and Emily be hired and things like that, but in terms of direct line of sight, this is what we did, this is what happened as a consequence. I think there's very little to show, and I think that's something that really needs to guide the work of this group going forward. And if one of the things needs to be that we spend a lot more time coming up with more detailed climate action plans, then I think that's the kind of thing that we should focus on if that's really what the administrator and council is looking for.
How do we can we survey the rest of council to see if that's what the rest of council wants? Or can you help us get that information? I appreciate your input, but
I would say it in the reverse. If I take something to them that urges them to do the right thing and fund it, I don't see anybody on council saying, let's not fund that, because they do support, I mean, what they're doing with these monies is, at a very base level, they're showing of support for taking action on the 2012 plan. But if we don't go forward with particularized goals and outcomes, I'm not sure that we'll have anything more to point at next year than we have this year. So for example, I would urge this body to adopt and pass a resolution urging the DDA to install solar panels on the Ashley Ann parking structure when they spend $22 million to renovate that. The little bit of extra money it's going to cost to put solar panels in that project is a rounding error compared to the enormous amount of money they're going to spend. And if we got them to do that, next year we'd say one of the things that we accomplished is that we covered an entire parking structure with solar panels.
That's an easy one.
Huh?
That's a relatively easy one.
Yeah.
In some respects.
And so back to what she was saying, rather than ask council how they feel about my belief that we should propose particular plans, I think that we should just take particular plans to them because they're not going to vote against it. They're just not going to.
I think that maybe.
Sounds like other things we've done, so are you saying we need to
So
go out and price
what have you
that
sent to council
project?
that we didn't do?
Train station. We said, ask that solar be put on that train station and that the train station be a net energy producer.
And what about the programs that Commissioner Mirsky outlined before? I mean, we proposed 4 specific programs. They have not been adopted.
And I think to say that they didn't have enough detail, to some degree that's true, but to some degree, we have other examples of it in places like Boulder that you can look at for more detail. And to ask, I think if you look at somebody like the Environmental Commission, they don't sit, when they wanted to do a bigger composting project, you got a consultant to look into what that composting project would be. They didn't come down and they say, well, we're gonna need X number of drivers and you know, X number of square feet of land to put this on and that kind of detail. So
Are you talking about the consulting contract we just passed? The $250,000?
You're talking about the organics plan, or which one?
yeah, yeah.
Which, okay.
So, you know, there's, we
Well,
could have
then-
gone farther with detail.
Then you should propose to us that we hire a consultant to do that.
Well, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Well,
That's what the $75,000 is for,
yeah,
although,
and I haven't heard any opposition to that.
In-
It's the idea that before we have that plan, we're already going to designate how much money we're going to spend on whatever that person comes up with, as opposed to telling him to go spend $900,000 a year.
well, the $900,000 actually came out of our, as John talked to earlier, the sketchy plans that we had sent to council and given to the administrator. So and previous, I think we suffer from a few things. One is, and I won't go through the whole process, but over the last 8 to 10 years, we have had severe problems with staffing levels. And we have quite often taken the tact of sitting down with staff and saying, well, let's try and do this, you know, let's buy some electric vehicles, and they go to the person who runs the vehicles thing, and they go, well, they're not cost effective. They cost too much, so don't even go there. So as opposed to taking things formally to council, we've taken the tact of trying to work more directly with staff, and maybe that's a mistake. So,
It's
but-
true, electric vehicles are wildly
And over the
expensive.
last 10 or 12 years, funding for almost anything in the community was very difficult because of changes in the tax climate.
But it must be a communication issue, because you're saying electric vehicles are widely expensive, but you wanted to recommend putting solar panels on every rooftop without vetting it. So I think we do need a better understanding of what level of detail council needs to support recommendations, because no matter what level we've provided in the past, we're not tailoring it correctly. So what, should we be pricing out projects and essentially providing the role of
Or you should be
consultants?
identifying what you want staff to seek prices on. I mean, this
Well, can
group, and if staff comes back to you and says, well, I'm not capable of telling you how much a energy auditing program for the whole community would cost us, then that's when we start to decide whether we devote staff time to that or hire a consultant. But
That was basically done.
having it be one of 4 programs that you just give to us and ask us to fund doesn't really tell us what you're going to do under those broad categories.
Well, staff were actually at many of the meetings that those programs came out of.
Yeah.
And so that they were there at the table and able to comment on them, and so we ended up with it. But that's all water under the bridge.
Well, I think, I accept your challenge, and
No, we can do better.
we'll meet and we'll
We'll do
talk
better.
about what we can do. What I would also ask for self-reflection on both sides. I know you were not a part of council when the climate action plan was passed, but you were elected to council the following year. So there were very aggressive targets that were set. There was a plan that was actually very detailed, 84 projects granted, or actions. Each one of those are projects, so there was a lot of work to be done to detail those even further. But what council didn't do, including you and all other council people that say they're in support of environmental issues and sustainability and climate action, is that they provided no resources to actually implement the plan. There were funds for the creation of the plan. there were no funds for the implementation of the plan. You have two sustainability people, Matt Naud and Nate Geisler. 90% of Matt's time is paid for things other than the general fund, so Gelman and whatever else. Nate is 40% for other things. And then you had two seasonal employees that work 29 hours a week, that work for 10 months, and then they go away for 2 months and hope that they come back and hire. So council also has to say, if we're more than just trying to do politically the right thing, but we really are honestly serious about making progress, then we have to provide the resources to staff to be able to come up with the detailed plans, not people like us who have a commitment, our only commitment is to advise the city. That's our commitment. Our job is not to implement anything. Our job is not to work up detailed plans. So it's not the job of this committee to develop detailed plans. If council says we're going to make these dramatic reductions in greenhouse gas emissions community-wide, not just the city, then council also has to give the administration the competence and, let's say, the headcount and the resources to be able to develop those kinds of plans. And that hasn't happened. And to this day, it still isn't in place because, again, we have somebody that's gone with the expertise in that area.
To give you an example of the Climate Action Plan, they got a grant to fund that. And when the amount of money was done, it was dropped. So if you look in the Climate Action Plan for how many kilowatt hours the city uses or the entire community uses, you can't find it because it was going to be in the appendix. And the appendix was never completed because we ran out of money.
It's time to update the Climate Action Plan. So I think
That's what
if
we've
we
been saying.
rate some.
Every year for the last 3 years.
If we distill it, I think we can do this pretty quickly.
Anyways.
If we have the role to do that, I've given a spreadsheet to the team, let's do it. Let's put some measurable metric goals in and start making recommendations.
But
You said you would
agree.
lead that
If
team.
we don't
I'm
know how
waiting
much
for an
we're using, how
invitation
will
to
we ever
actually
know if
meet
we're
and do
saving
that.
any? You know?
Oh, we know how much we're using, it's just not in the plan.
Oh, okay.
The only thing that's in the plan is the tons of CO2. And which for the average person in the audience, what the hell does that mean? You know, the amount, I sat down one time and I figured out that the amount of CO2 generation by this community, if the community was flat, would go 198 feet up Tower Plaza building, dead low. But, most people don't know what a ton of CO2 looks like. Doesn't look like anything because it's clear, but it's about the size of your average 50s ranch house. So the gist is when you look at the Climate Action Plan, a lot of it is a little bit removed from what the general public would understand.
So
Because we ran out of money.
So then I just want to
Josh has
repeat.
new numbers from the Climate Action Plan. And I was talking to him before that probably by August, we should be able to update the energy efficiency and solar goals for that Climate Action Plan,
Let's
which
do
now
it.
gives us a target, I think, reporting those to the council, saying these are the firm targets. Our estimation is that we can solve X of this with solar, X of this with energy efficiency, da-da-da-da-da. And we can probably get that far just with the people around this table.
But we shouldn't just simply report it so that it's appended to an agenda. We should probably take it with an ask. And that's what I'm here for. Your council member on your
That's a good
committee
point.
is supposed to take your ask to council to try to describe the goal that we're aiming at and how we would measure accomplishment and how much it's going to cost to get there. And I hope that I've been clear that that's really what I intend to do while I'm here is not pass resolutions expressing a desire to do something by a date, but actually to express a goal and a means of accomplishing it.
That would be good. Great. Without further ado, we now have some members from the community in the audience, and I believe they're from Pioneer High School, who's been working on a wonderful project to try and put solar on the roof of their building, and we'd love to hear about it. providing we can get the technical difficulties down.
Apologies.
Come on, we got Josh, he can do anything.
I try. Try my best.
Very good.
These are the name of the file.
How's Dave?
Pioneer somewhere. I'm assuming this one.
And we also have to say that we have
I'm assuming
our
the name.
revered retired energy czar in the audience who's been helping them with this, acting as a guide, a mentor.
The two screens.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. Good evening. My name is Jacob Siegel. I am the group leader of the solar panel project here at Pioneer High School. I guess a brief introduction about sort of myself. I'm a senior this year. I will be attending Purdue next year. Aside from doing solar panels, I am a member of a captain of the varsity crew team. I am a captain of the first robotics team, and then I do this in, school.
I'm Lizzie Williams. I'm a junior. I am captain of the varsity ethics bowl team, which is sort of similar to debate at Pioneer. I'm the head coxswain on the Pioneer crew team, as well as they're involved in Pioneer Sustainability Coalition.
Try and get close enough to the mic that people at home can hear you.
All right, Cooper, you want to go?
I'm Cooper Height. I am currently a freshman at Pioneer, and aside from working on the solar panels, I am also on the freshman crew team, and I also do FIRST Robotics.
Great.
I am James Wishart. I'm a junior at Pioneer. I am a varsity rower. I am an Eagle Scout and still try to stay active in my troop. I'm part of the National Honor Society at Pioneer, and and I've been working on this project as when it sort of started 2-ish years ago.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I never saw the connection between crew and solar before, but this is great. I love
All
it.
right, so oh yeah, so. And then back and forth, just arrow keys.
Wow.
Need taller heels. So we are part of the Sustainability Coalition at Pioneer, which is a much larger collection of many small groups. Oh, we can bend it. That's useful. Of many small groups trying to work towards the bigger project of saving our planet before it is too late. The solar panels is one of the more active groups. There's also a group that works on educating elementary schoolers, and they go into classrooms. They talk about renewable energy as well. I think there's also a bird group who count the number of birds that hit Pioneer windows.
So to get sort of started with the solar stuff that we've done, so we were able to acquire a copy of Pioneer's Power Bill, which we've got up here. So we use a lot of power, and we were all very surprised with actually how much we use, because you sort of go and you see that all the lights are on, but they're on when you get there, they're on when you leave, and they don't really ever turn off. And you're like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But it totals to a fair amount. So it totals to almost $300,000 a year, which we're like, that's a fair amount of money that could be put in a lot of different other places that is not power. So we realized that when we looked at this bill, we realized, unfortunately, we're billed sort of as an industrial style billing. So we're not billed, directly based on how much we use. We're billed based on peaks. And unfortunately, the solar panels won't really help with that because clouds are a thing, unfortunately. But they will help reduce the overall that we use. So as we sort of move on, we've factored in a much lower cost for our returns, but I guess that sort of explains why. So this is the roof of Pioneer. It is a large, flat roof, so very ideally suited for solar panels. we realized that part of sort of our student experience is it's very, very hot in the summer because it's a large, flat, black roof, and it just absorbs all this extra sunlight. So that would be one of the advantages of putting solar panels up there. We also realized, we did sort of a little bit more digging in terms of the feasibility of putting a lot of solar panels up there in terms of what's the building look like, what do the blueprints look like, were they ever, you know, is this building actually capable of supporting the number of solar panels we'd like to put on there? And we discovered that actually the C Hall, the one that's in the upper left, sort of parallel to the top of the frame, is it had footings built for a 4th floor, which there's only 3. So we're assuming solar panels weigh less than a whole nother floor. And the same with D, which is in the sort of left, parallel to the side, is built for a 3rd floor, and there's only 2. So we realized that there's a lot of extra structural integrity in that building that could be used to support these panels.
So the roof measurements where it's a rough-ish number because using satellite images to sort of give an estimate of the lengths and sort of using the simple rectangles to find a total area. And so it comes out to we have a lot of space. We have 20, as you can see there, I can read, 224,000 square feet we can cover, which gives us 2 million, that's kilowatt hours, right? 2 million kilowatt hours, which can take a big chunk out of our energy consumption at ideally, and again, this is an ideal number, so like perfect, beautiful conditions. It can ideally take about 81% of Pioneer's energy output, but I'm sure something you're all thinking is, how much is this going to cost up front? And it's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's not cheap. It's about $4.5 million, but as with any solar project, it's a massive upfront investment for a long-term return. So it will pay itself back over the long term, because considering there are no moving parts and you basically just let them sit and generate electricity, it's basically, once you paid for it, it's there and it's immediately starting to generate return. So the project has the capability to pay itself back fairly quickly. And so it can save us $127,000 a year approximately. And so over time, that would 18 times the science budget at Pioneer. But as you can see, $100,000 a year quickly can, within a few decades, add up to that $4 million. And then because it's already paid off, everything is just going back into school system, or back into whatever the city sees fit to use the money for. So.
All right, let's see if our video is gonna play.
I think it is.
Oh, maybe.
It's thinking about it. It
It's
opens Internet Explorer.
Is there audio?
No, there is no audio.
Uh-oh.
Sir.
You go down to the menu bar, you see.
It's there, it's very faint. You can pump it up all the way.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's closed caption. Oh, I guess so.
Well, it's
I guess YouTube gave us closed caption.
well, they're generated by a computer, so we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how accurate they are.
Simultaneous.
sound, huh?
All right.
So along with, saving the school money through energy, there are also tons of educational opportunities that can come out of these solar panels. So we have a great engineering program at Pioneer High School, and this could be, there's a lot of kids in those engineering classes who would be really interested in working with these solar panels. And so we could either integrate the solar panels into the curriculum for those, or even make an entirely new class for these solar panels. Also, the AP Environmental Science class is very interested in this project because they have already built solar ovens to boil water. So they're really interested in working with, actual solar panels and finding out those capabilities. Also, AP Physics is very interested in this project because they could add a supplemental unit into their year and learn about the physics behind solar panels.
Additionally, to add to that point, not only would there be science benefits to this, there would also be benefits for the more politically minded, like myself at Pioneer. Science is not really my strong suit. Where we were looking as the future politicians and leaders of America to put in more renewable energy. So it's not just beneficial to the science program, it's beneficial to our wonderful law program, where we're looking into environmental law as well. Oh, it worked. Another thing about Pioneer that we could have, because of the way our school is built, as it is built as a large school that used to hold almost all of Ann Arbor High School students before Skyline was built, it would work very well as an emergency preparedness microgrid. So an emergency preparedness microgrid is a place where members of the community can go during natural disasters such as, we had the windstorm last year, where majority of the Lawton neighborhood lost power for over a week. So Pioneer not only has a kitchen and much space for this, we have empty classrooms. If they're generated by solar panels, there would be less of an issue of, what if the electricity at Pioneer went out too, or what if the electricity at U of M went out, as we are powered on the U of M grid. So Pioneer would fulfill many of the requirements for the emergency preparedness microgrid. Ideally, not all of them. Unfortunately, we do not have electric vehicles, but we would be able to function as many.
Oh, that's the end. I think that's the end. At this point, if you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer anything. Yeah.
Just, I guess, a clarification. You said that somebody said that the solar system would take about 80% of the $264,000 bill, and then that 80% equaled $100,000 a year, and I think that's
127,000, right?
It's actually 80% of your 264 is about 215,000, which means you got an 18-year payback versus a 40-year payback. So you want to make sure those two numbers are clear. The other piece is over that 18 to 25-year period, energy is going to be more expensive for DTE, so actually the payback would improve if you look at some of the projections DTE is making, especially from the new power plant that they've just been awarded and stuff, that our electricity costs are actually going to go up for the school, so that your payback would actually increase.
Right. Yeah, we decided just to keep with regular energy, like the energy costs of like today, just as sort of a conservative estimate. so that, no one's gonna complain if it gets paid back faster.
Right.
We're not.
I guess, and the last thing is, I think I love the idea of integrating it into the curriculum. I think that's a great idea. My sense is that those programs that would do that would have to pay for a simulation or pay for access to information about an operating array someplace, and that by doing it on their own building, it's a savings to those programs. Somewhere in those projections is a savings for not having to build a model array or buy into somebody else's array someplace to monitor it. So those costs would be additional savings on this. It's a great project. Do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Do it.
Other questions?
I have one quick question. I know that you participated in the GLREA contest. I believe another high school in southeastern Michigan won the contest, and I'm wondering if you've looked at their submission and if you learned any lessons from what they did compared to what you presented and submitted.
So we are planning on doing that. Right now we are in the midst of our competitive cruise season. We're actually traveling to Ohio for the regional competition this weekend. So once our schedules free up a little, we do plan on looking at them, maybe even visiting the school and talking to their team.
Great.
To answer Mark's question, the deal with these guys is the school's on a D11 rate. So it's mostly demand, so displacing kilowatt hours saves them 4.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And I made them use that number, even though it looks terrible, because they can only do better.
Right.
Either through a PERPA contract, or which they actually know a little bit about, or other things. But we kept it that way, just as he said, if you beat your projection, you look better. They're here today because, well, they didn't win the contest, and I do plan to give them access to the other people's entries and introduce, I will help you guys on all of that stuff. But what we're looking at, our next phase, is to begin raising money to actually make this happen. This is not the only school in Michigan. We had 17 different schools compete in this contest and submit entries, and the top few were awarded small prizes of about $500 or so to get them started. We have a lot more grant money that we're going to use in what we call phase 2, and it's going to be done in a matching way where if they raise $10, we'll give them $10 more to match it up to a certain amount. That funding comes both from the state energy office and from some other places. So we want to keep this alive. Some are going to be leaving, but others will be around next year. So hopefully we can keep this going into next year. And the vision, certainly the larger vision of, covering the school with solar collectors would be awesome. And I got to tell you that I do work a lot with the Ann Arbor Public Schools at the highest levels, and they really have those visions. But for right now, this idea of building a demonstration system that can be utilized by their engineering courses and actually creating a one-semester class on renewable energy that's a hands-on class that handles these solar collectors, builds the system, learns all about it, in the course of a semester. Then you take it apart, and the next semester another class comes in and begins to learn the same thing. I think it's an awesome vision, and more in the $20,000 to $40,000 range to be able to afford to put that together. So I was here early, and I listened to Jack's wisdom where he said, you got to come with an ask. It's good enough to come and have these guys show you what they're doing, but we have an ask for you guys. We want to start raising money to make this real. And, where does that money come from? I don't know. You guys have ideas probably as good or better than ours.
So Dave, are you willing and the team willing to talk about some different ownership models? As an example, as you know, the public schools department and the city can't monetize tax credits, but if we start looking at doing a project pretty quick while that still exists, we can come up with a strategy. I'm doing it right now on other facilities where we're putting in solar, taking advantage of the tax credits and selling the whole array back after the system's got those benefits accrued, and everybody wins. The school wins in this case.
The whole idea of this project, besides actually achieving solar collectors on the school, is for them to learn.
Exactly.
And so, you know, learning about this, every aspect of doing this is all good.
Yep.
And if you're volunteering to come and talk to them at some workshop or whatever, they might be willing to listen. I don't know.
Count me in, and an invitation to the Innovation Center in Jackson would be wonderful. They could see a microgrid that's tied to solar.
I don't know what the rules are for field trips.
I know.
When I first started out, I suggested I could get them up on the roof of Pioneer. Turns out I couldn't. There are limitations to things, but, you know.
That's what drones are for.
We love ideas, but right now, you know, I mean, we've watched, some of the schools that we competed against have already started raising money in very interesting ways, which I will show them what they're up to. But, you know, they've raised $30,000, $40,000, some of these schools, and I think we can do the same thing here in Ann Arbor. Give us a little time, and with the support of the Energy Commission and your ideas helping us out, all the better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Great.
It's a wonderful
You guys, great
presentation.
project.
It's great that you're doing this, and I hope you'll continue to be interested in learning about solar and being involved with it, because it's here today and it makes sense. And enjoy your crewing competition.
Yeah, really. Good luck.
Thank you.
If you do as well at crewing as you did on this, you guys are gonna win. So.
Well, that was great. Oh, now on to the exciting stuff. Bylaws.
I wonder, I have one connection. We have Dave Krause in town in the school.
Okay. Sort of, before we get too far into this. Yes.
Okay. So, the bylaws of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, basically you guys all had recommendations of the changes you wanted to see. I worked with Chris Frost to create, or I guess he gave it to me in the end, but these bylaws of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. If you go through, I actually kept the track changes. So you can see in blue, and usually there's, you know, whatever the change was. So on page 4, for example, there's a track change. On page 6, there's another couple of track changes. Those were part of the recommendations that you guys made. For the other recommendations that he wasn't able to make, he told me they went back to the resolution creating the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, which, as you see, are the bylaws. Basically, that section, the Article 2, 3, 4, that's all grabbed directly from the resolution creating the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. So, I guess there's a couple of things that you guys could do. You could either pass the bylaws as they stand now with the changes that Chris has basically implemented. You can postpone passing the bylaws and then, again, make the changes to the resolution creating the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. And then that would essentially change the remaining, do the remaining edits to the bylaws of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. I know that was super confusing. If you guys have questions, please let me know.
So these have been embedded in what we've seen, right?
These are basically, yeah, they make up the top portion, that first page of the bylaws.
Okay.
Yeah. And I quickly drafted with Chris also just a resolution if we do want to change the Energy Commission, we'll just say the founding document for ease. Just so, you know, the remainder of the changes that weren't able to be done on the bylaws themselves. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I met with him, or I guess we met with him a couple months ago. Went through this.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
So.
Josh, is this open now for discussion, or?
Yeah. I'll pass it back over to Will.
Yeah, I think we can discuss this without having a resolution.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I sent initially some comments. I missed the working session where this was discussed. I sent some follow-up comments. And I also talked to Chris this morning.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things that I at least wanted to make sure that were aired and then potentially addressed. First is that I can't find real quickly the paragraph where it says the mayor appoints. Where is that? That's in 4
So
somewhere, isn't
Article
it?
4.1,
4.1.
the commission shall consist of.
Appointed by the mayor, yes. So one of the things that I had proposed in the original email and again in the second email is that there be a statement that, to the effect that it's recommended that the mayor's office contact the chairperson of the commission before either reappointing a commissioner or appointing a new commissioner. And I know that in practice, that happens with some commissions. I've talked to some commission chairs and that has happened, but it's not something that happens all the time. It may not be possible to do it in all cases, but I'd like it to be reflected in the bylaws, at least my request, that at least there's sort of an expectation that that's the case. It may be that some commissioners are absent often. I know there's a clause in here that says that they should not miss more than 3 meetings, but I wouldn't know how the mayor would know that unless there's some kind of communication between the mayor's office and the chair. There may be someone who's regularly attending meetings and participating in meetings, has submitted an application and an interest in being on the commission, and there may be other people that have done the same thing but have never showed up to a single meeting. Those kinds of things, that kind of feedback, that kind of input could be provided by the chairperson of the commission. So that's one of the main concerns that I had. The other one I understand has basically been addressed in the discussions that you had, and that is that everybody on the commission feels comfortable with the conflict of interest points, and that people with potential conflicts of interest would be discussed, and then there would be some type of a vote on whether or not that person could participate or vote then in the matter at hand. Those are my 2 main concerns.
Yeah,
Are those?
Just to note that, so in this draft resolution.
Yes.
Section 1, I actually did include, all members shall be appointed after consultation with the commission chair, so that is actually in the draft. I don't know.
Okay,
if you guys
good.
want to keep it or not.
Yep, sorry, I missed that.
As a point of record, last night at the city council, 3 of you were approved for re-enlistment, and I was not confirmed.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I'm happy that all 3 are back for more work.
When I was appointed, I had to meet with the current council member.
Right.
So it wasn't the chair, but it was someone who attends meetings.
Yeah,
Oh.
good.
At the time, it was Chip.
Well, what we're talking about is the
After
mayor
or before?
conferring.
When I applied before the vote, like, the mayor said, meet with him and I'll take his recommendation. Just so you know what's currently being
So
done.
with the Jack's equivalent, you
Yeah,
met with Chip, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so the mayor accepted me because Chip recommended me. Or like,
So the wording here, as I read it, requires the mayor to consult with commission chair. I'm certainly okay with that. I would also be okay with at least that being a recommendation. There may be instances where the mayor feels that that's not appropriate. I don't know, maybe the chairperson, him or herself is not in good standing or something, I don't know. But I don't know how other people feel about that.
Well, it's in consultation, right? That's the wording?
Yeah, I mean,
In
that's.
It's we answer this to the commission, so, and they can ask our opinion, but we can't veto.
Right, that's
so,
okay.
right.
So I think it's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
I don't think that the bylaws of this commission can bind the mayor to do anything.
That's very true.
It governs this body, and
Right.
the mayor is.
but this is recommending the city council
Yeah.
not do this.
Yeah, okay.
So we're asking them.
So the bylaws can include that, I suppose.
You're right.
But this would be in the
In the resolution instead?
In the founding document, yeah, this is recommending city council to change this.
Yeah, that's correct.
But they're updating all the bylaws for all the commissions.
Yeah.
So, are we gonna have it, we be out of sync with the other commissions with this statement?
But it wouldn't be in the bylaws, it would be in the
Yeah,
founding
it would be
document.
in the yeah, she's right, and I apologize for not
Okay.
catching that.
That wouldn't be in the bylaws, it would be in the founding document. We're asking council to modify the founding document.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And still that would
The
be,
non-stapled things.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought
Yeah.
we were,
The old one.
I thought we
There's
were.
Yeah,
two
so,
things.
yeah, so basically there's
There's
the
the stapled
bylaw,
thing and the non-stapled
Yeah.
thing.
Right here.
and then there's the founding resolution,
Oh,
and,
okay.
yeah.
I got you. I misunderstood. Right. Okay, that's here, yes. That's right.
Yeah, because the bylaws basically grab directly from the founding resolution.
So, there's one thing in here, and I think we talked about it before, and I forget exactly how it was resolved, and that is as to whether or not the liaisons from city council vote.
Yeah.
And there was a statement made earlier this evening that Councilperson Bannister voted at the Environmental Commission. So, and council members of this commission up until about 2 years ago voted, and then we were told that was not to be the case. And hence, they have not voted.
That was one of the comments that I made. Our council persons voting members, question mark, this should be defined. And then there's one other point, if I may, just while I have the floor.
Sure.
There's no mention of liaisons to or from other commissions.
Yeah.
And I think that's also important, that that be codified.
I agree. Are we the only commission that does that, us and the Environmental Commission, or do other commissions do that, planning and
Have
mental health and
liaisons?
stuff? Have liaisons from the other commissions?
Yeah, I mean, the Planet Commission has a liaison to the Environmental Commission. The Parks and Housing, I think.
So it must be in
Why doesn't it go both
somebody's
ways?
rules about commissions. That's this
I'm
commission
not
level.
sure what's in whose, I haven't looked at all the other bylaws to
Oh.
know.
Do we, and we
So-
don't have a liaison from environmental to us, right? It's just, we have one from energy to.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I mean,
it's,
I
yeah.
Okay.
essentially serve both ways, but
Yeah.
yeah.
He was appointed to do that.
Environmental Commission has someone also from Planning Commission
Parks,
and Parks.
Yeah.
Yes.
maybe Housing, no?
Not now.
So I think, and then there was some discussion about whether or not we wanted to change things in the front part of the bylaws defining our purpose, which would require a resolution to go back to council to change the statement from March 1986, when the, or December 85,
Right.
when the commission was created.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a question as to whether or not people feel strongly that we should do that, in which case we should simply ask for that, and because that would have to be done before we vote on passing the bylaws.
Yeah, so in the kind of draft resolution, the section 4 has energy efficiency to energy and climate. There was an earlier version of this where I had literally just spelled, I put the same language and then put in bold the changes. But Chris recommended just to do kind of a checklist and that would suffice. So if you do see,
Okay.
yeah, in the draft resolution sheet. So it says change energy efficiency to energy and climate, for example, kind of stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah.
and so if we're going to take this resolution to council, I would like to have attached to it the original language with the changes indicated within the, the entirety, so that
Yeah.
what we're doing is passing the entirety so that you don't have to go to two places to find out what we're
Sure.
talking about.
Exactly.
Yep, that makes
Okay.
sense.
So the the change to the councilperson voting, is that be in the resolution, or is that just the bylaws? So in other words, is that part of the founding documents, or is that just something that we can implement in our bylaws?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it would be the founding resolution, basically. So the idea is, we made edits to the bylaws, the ones that were recommended, but part of this is attached to the founding resolution. So we'd have to edit essentially the founding resolution. So we'd suggest the council to make those edits. And that's where this kind of, again, this rough draft of section 1 and section 4 laying out some of those edits. That's where that comes in. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
So my own opinion is that we should add in there and have the councilperson back to being a voting member.
Mm-hmm.
How we operated before, but apparently wasn't in the bylaws. And I agree with Commissioner Mirsky too about let's put in the liaison functions as well.
Mm-hmm.
With those, I think it captured. I was also trying to look back at Shoshana's email, which had a few of the ideas from last time that she was questioning why they weren't in here. I think we should take a look at that as well.
Okay.
Pull it out with others.
Just to piggyback on Mike's comments, 11 voting members would then become more than 11 if the council person representative were to have voting rights, correct?
Well, right now we have 11 plus Jack makes 12.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that number would have to change. Right.
Well, we just have one less commissioner.
No.
Or,
You're concerned about tie votes, or?
no, I'm just saying, right now,
Yeah.
the Article 4
You
says the
would
commission
you
shall
would need to
consist
change
of
that, yes.
11 voting members. So either we have to say 11 non-council voting members, or if we want to allow, and that's what I hear, and I actually think that's a good idea.
I do too.
To have the council person have voting rights, then the number 11
Becomes 12.
becomes 12, or we only have 11, let's say, resident appointees.
So with 12, we get a deadlock. That's the reason why.
Yeah, but just to be clear, I'm also appointed by the mayor to this task. So if you wanted to keep it 11, you could.
I'm fine with that.
It makes no difference to me.
I mean, that way there's no tie votes.
Right.
Do we have
Although,
12 people now? Because I know we've had some vacancies. I mean, including Councilman Eaton.
We have one person whose term is up at the end of this month that was not reinstated, I believe. So we're going to be one person short.
So have we made recommendations of who we like?
No one's talked to me about it.
in practical terms, we rarely have everybody here anyhow. So if, we're trying to create a situation where we don't have tie votes, but one or three or whatever people are missing, we're going to potentially have that anyhow.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't let that
yes.
necessarily guide.
There's ways to
I
solve
think
that.
we need
Yes.
as much help as we can get, and so I'm against reducing the number of members by one.
Yeah.
It's fine with me if we go to 12 voting members,
Yeah.
including the council person.
But I'm also in favor of expressing, either through Jack or through some communication to the council, that, we, of the people that are there, one of the people that's there, we know them, we've worked with them, and we would, ask that they appoint that person. That's what we did with John. That's the reason why we can't seek consultation on this by being proactive. And we have precedent for doing that. And I think you guys suggested that I be appointed. So now's the time to do that, and there's several people that are in that queue that have been here and active with us,
That's-
that would be
that's
good
true.
candidates.
That is true.
So what do we do?
Well,
Do we
it
tell
sounds like I
Jack?
should try and
Well,
contact
it's,
the mayor.
it's in this resolution here that after consultation,
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not in the new bylaws stuff, so I would,
well, but I think that this
Would
is,
that
this
carry
is
them
more
over to
instrumental
this?
because this is the creating document and
Okay.
the city charter actually gives the council authority to tell the mayor how a commission will be appointed.
Okay.
Whereas the bylaws just govern this body.
okay.
Can you
Maybe you
repeat
could
what you were
reinforce that,
saying?
Jack. Maybe you could reinforce that, because I don't know who's in all the people who are in the queue for that, but several of the people who have applied have been active on subcommittees, have shown up at meetings here and stuff like that. And so they should consult with Wayne.
I will make an effort to
Yeah, I
get
mean,
in touch with the mayor.
That's in the resolution, so
I
I
know,
think,
I know.
yeah, so I think it's fine.
We have a hole now, we can appoint somebody now, let's,
Well, I just want to say that, say if I were mayor, appointments would be a little more transparent and after wide open consultation, but I can't speak to how they're doing it now because they don't consult me.
perhaps you could say, let them know that we've expressed
I will bring that point up.
such consultations be more robust in the future.
I do want to point out that if we are looking to if we're looking to add people to the commission, that that the additions are more likely to look like the people already in the room. So it would be
That is
wise
the
for
problem.
us to try to
Agreed.
put out a broader call for applicants. It might be worth
Very good point.
trying to get a call on the social media accounts or something of the city.
Agreed.
You suggesting we're all white?
I'm suggesting that you're all white and mostly male. But I was doing it so delicately until you said
You
that.
were.
Suggesting we're all old white guys. It's even worse. All right.
Okay.
So what's the action? We're voting on the resolution then, is that my understanding, or?
Sure.
I think we have to first get a feel for, do you want the resolution to go to council so that it comes back to you and then you can address your changes in the bylaws that you want to do? Is that what you want?
Do you think these changes are materially important?
I think they are material and important, but I don't think that we're going to get any resistance at all. I think that they need to be done before you do much more with your bylaws.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, why wouldn't we wait to do that, so we can do it in one fell swoop? And so get the resolution back and then revise the bylaws. I agree. I
When
also
would it
want
be appropriate to talk about the conflict of interest? Is that now, or should I wait till it comes back to us?
We could talk to, we've talked about it a little bit before, but we can certainly talk more about it. Yeah, I mean, I have no problem. You seem to have
I would like to see a sentence added that conflicts of interest should be disclosed in meetings. Because right now it seems to, in the 5.9 just seems to refer to when you're making an appearance and like claiming to be a commissioner, but I don't see anything about disclosing conflict of interest if we were discussing something during a meeting that related to your place of work, for example.
That was in my verbal comments as well. In my view, commissioners should be required to declare their, in parentheses, potential conflict of interest. And so that's declared right out front. And only they would know, and they would be required, and if they didn't do that, then they would potentially be subject to reprimand or who knows what.
Well, more specifically,
what
I think it needs to be
5.4
repeated
says?
at each meeting for the benefit of the public.
Yes, yeah. At every point that it's discussed. I mean, it may not apply to to points of discussion on the agenda, but when it does. they
Doesn't
need to do that.
5.4 say that,
Right.
though? A member of the
I guess
commission
I don't
shall
understand.
disclose
I don't
the
understand the
general
point
nature
you're
of
trying
any
to make.
potential conflict or real or apparent, or
Right.
Where does it say that, man?
5.4.
5.4. I was looking at 5.1.
So, as a,
Okay.
just a
yeah.
clarification.
Okay,
on
yeah,
that.
I was
You're right.
zeroed in on 5.9.
And I
I
was
think it
looking
could
at
be a bit
5.1.
strengthened,
Yeah.
because I think it should have been applied in the past year or so in Walden.
So just, so how this works sometimes, I have a real example. So when I did my solar system and went to the city with the tax tribunal, so I notified Wayne of a potential conflict of interest. And basically, we agreed that I would recuse myself on any vote or any issue, including not participating in meetings on solar that with the chair, excuse me, the Minister Lazarus, others, and asked Wayne specifically to help if should he see that I'm engaging in a conflict, either by accident or intent, to publicly call that out. So that's how that
I
gets
really
done.
appreciate that.
You know. Yes. So I think.
But I think it sounds like you're a very honorable dude. Thanks.
No. But I think that's how.
I feel odd saying it because Shoshana's not here, but I was uncomfortable during the DTE discussion that I know she works for DTE, but she forgot to mention at that meeting, so people in the public, sitting in the public weren't aware. And so maybe making this language a tiny bit stronger to say that it needs to be repeated for the sake of the public, even if everyone on the commission is aware.
Perhaps the way to do that is when we sign in, like roll call, that our affiliation is set along with our names.
No.
Well, I think it's pretty clear in section 5.4, these disclosures shall be made prior to discussion and voting when possible and shall be recorded in the minutes of the proceedings. So the implication is there that any time a subject comes up, the disclosure shall be made, and it should also be noted in the meeting.
What about
So we have this-
shall be made public?
Yeah, since we have this opportunity to nitpick, could we just add a couple words
Because I hear
to
what you're
say,
saying, 'cause
for the
if
sake
that
of the public?
I agree, because if that
we all
happens
know.
behind the scenes, then the nature of the debate could be different.
So how does that really happen, though? I mean, do you say, Mr. Chair, I'm uncomfortable, I think you need to say something about this? Or do you say, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation, I think the general public needs to know that you're representing DTE? Or do we just come back after the meeting and say, Wayne, you should have done your job better? I mean, I'm a real stickler on how this actually gets done. Because right now, it is everybody who comes on the commission is expected to be honorable and to follow those rules. So if we don't think that they are, then whose job is it to say something?
Maybe say that the onus is on the commissioner, but with backup support from the chair. Like, because again, if you just forget that, because you don't remember that people don't know.
Well, I would refer back in our bylaws, right? I mean, 4.9, someone could be removed for cause. I think that actually would likely be the remedy.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it actually says in the bylaws what you would do.
But the disclosure of a potential conflict of interest is different than having an actual conflict of interest. It's a much more demanding standard. Just the potential so everybody knows where the person's speaking from. We run into this on council once in a while. And our city charter requires us to vote on every matter that comes before us unless we recuse ourselves.
Right.
And so we get into these discussions about potential conflicts. And it really is the commission members' responsibility to disclose even the appearance of a conflict.
Right.
Even if everybody at the table agrees that it's not an actual conflict and lets them participate. And so I guess that's something that we should discuss. But we now have somebody that oversees boards and commissions for us.
Right.
And that should be part of the oversight process that they're gonna start training us on being
That's
on
a
board.
good point. Whatever the right language is, it must be boilerplate language that other commissions should be using as well. So can we forward the question to them to say what would be the most ethical language?
And if you look at an agenda in advance and you see something that you're not sure if it creates a conflict, you should ask staff to consult us at the attorney's office. Because you just want to be sure. You don't want somebody to say negative things about you just because you didn't know, you know?
Right.
You'd be surprised how few things actually create a real conflict of interest.
Very few.
My
It's a
sense
good
is
thing,
this
it's
is
a good thing
turning
that they
into,
don't require us to announce our bias.
I'd be much more comfortable with that.
my sense is that this is turning into a working session.
Yeah.
And my sense is that we need to do a little bit more homework.
Yes.
Yes.
I think, Josh, you've heard a lot of comments. You can consult with a couple of us that have spoken up,
Yeah.
at least several
Yeah,
of
John,
us.
actually, it would be really helpful if you just kind of spelled out the liaison, what you were thinking as far as adding it to.
I can
And
do
then we
that,
can-
and
yeah.
Sarah can also,
And whoever wants, just send me whatever you guys have, and I'll.
yep. I mean, we have all the documents now,
Yeah.
and I would say Josh is exactly right. We're obligated to provide him feedback and do so, I don't know, within the next week.
Yeah, sure.
And if not, then
Right.
we've had now multiple opportunities. This has been on the agenda a couple of times. There was a request for input. It was discussed at the working session, and we're still working on it.
Okay.
The only thing I'd add is that Commissioner Lenski's comments that she put on the email, because I know she couldn't be here
yeah,
tonight.
that's a good point.
I
Yes.
personally agree with all those, and I thought there were things we covered at the last meeting,
Yeah.
but I didn't see reflected. So she made 4 points. We don't need to go over
Right.
them, but I would support every one of those
I
going
would
in
too.
there, and she made specific language suggestions as well.
Great.
So I could probably get a draft back to you guys at the end of this week, as long as you guys send me stuff, and we can go ahead and just workshop it, make sure it looks
And you've
good.
seen Commissioner Linsky's?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Since there wasn't a formal resolution on the table at the time, we won't be tabling this, but we'll be discussing it further next time and presumably bringing it to a vote.
So, Mr. Chair, should we entertain a motion to send the resolution to council and await for their action on it?
The resolution for the changes in the,
Yeah.
Founding
in
the
the
governing
founding
document.
resolution.
documents.
That's a good point. We could do that. That would move things along.
I'm not a voting member, so I can't make that motion.
I move that we send this on to the council for
Second.
action.
Again, I'd say Commissioner Lenski's changes were actually to these founding documents, though.
Yeah, I
So
think
if we did that,
probably
I don't-
wanna,
Oh,
incorporate
that's a
all
good
of your,
point.
even the liaison.
Okay, I withdraw my
Hers are
motion.
not in here, but would be
Yeah,
incorporated into those sections, so.
Yeah, so it would change the resolution, so I don't want to do it twice.
yep. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just,
Unless somebody's got a copy of them and wanted to pencil it in to the resolution right now.
I can pull it up if you guys want.
So is the motion withdrawn?
Well, not yet.
Well, in
think
the
you could make a
sake of
motion
getting something
to-
done on this,
I think you could make a motion to have this presented to council as amended by her email, and that would suffice.
I do think we would still need the language for a liaison, though, so I don't know if you guys did you want to workshop that?
Didn't you write that down in here somewhere?
I do not have anything about
I
I
saw
have a
some-
council member
Why?
liaison, but I think for
Liaison.
other commissioners, or for other
One
commissions,
councilman
that's what I
liaison.
don't have.
Member shall be appointed.
Section 4.
Does that belong in the bylaws or in the governing document?
From my understanding, because of, let's see, the section 1 that says the commission shall have 11 members who shall be appointed by the mayor with the approval of the city council. There was some changes that were made or suggested to include no less than 1 council member. It would be probably now voting council member liaison. And that all members shall be appointed after consultation with the commissioner chair.
Yeah.
I don't know if describing liaison in that section makes sense for other commissions, but it could. I'm trying to, maybe if we go back to the bylaws, you guys see something where it'd fit better? Let's see.
No, that one seems to me like, more like a bylaws than founding
Okay.
documents or founding resolution, right, that level of specificity.
Yeah, especially since you would be putting the name of a commission that didn't exist when the
Yeah.
founding thing was, so
It was
may
kind
start
of,
to
yeah.
get into a problem with.
No,
I
that
don't
makes
know.
sense.
I don't know if I caught that exactly, but if we name a liaison, that means probably the founding document and/or the bylaws of the receiving commission also needs to reflect that, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Because,
and I'm not sure that it does at
and I'm
this
not sure
point.
that it does either.
I don't think I have a copy of, maybe I do.
For the environmental commission?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I brought it or not. Yes, I do have it.
You're looking at the bylaws?
Yes. Oh, it is in here.
It is.
It's, Article 4, membership, Section 1. The commission shall consist of 13 members nominated and approved by city council. Appointments shall be made insofar as possible with candidates who have an interest, Membership shall consist of 2 members of city council, 8 members of the public, and 3 members from city planning commission, parks advisory commission, or energy commission. The or is an interesting one.
Yeah. It names, it says 3, and it names
3.
3,
So conceivably, you could
Could be
get
2
3
from-
planning commission
right.
and none from anybody else, so that's,
That doesn't make sense.
that doesn't, there's something odd about that one. So we could, it also says the city administrator or her/his designee shall be an additional non-voting member of the commission,
Really?
which is interesting.
Is that the staff person then?
Yeah, wouldn't that be?
That
Wait,
would-
is
that's-
there a designee?
that would
That's
be
Josh.
Josh or Nate or Matt or,
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what that does, I'll have to look as to how they define quorum as to whether or not the non-voting member is part of a quorum or not.
I'd like to repeat, I don't know that this is urgent, and it seems to me we're crafting things here that shouldn't be crafted in a meeting. We've got input now, we know we need to go back
Okay.
and clean things up, including input from Commissioner Linsky, from comments given today. My preference would be that we clean things up and bring it back and hopefully have it 100% right or 99% right, but not 92% right.
So I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
So let's work on
That's-
it, we'll bring it up next
I'm fine
time.
with that, and it's probably gonna produce a better document.
I agree.
Yeah.
The only potential hassle with that, and I don't think any of this is really urgent,
Correct.
is
Dave
that
will
June
gaze
is usually a working session, in which case
Got something to work on now.
we could spend some time on it, but we could not vote on anything.
That's fine, and hopefully we don't have to spend much time on it. We have other things that we should be
Absolutely.
spending time on, like
Absolutely,
coming up with details,
Right.
climate action programs.
Right.
yes, okay. Moving right along. Updates from subcommittee. Energy Commission plan and priorities for CAP. I don't think that's met. Solar for all.
Who chairs that?
Well, if that's the Renewable Energy Committee, I guess I do.
I think Energy Commission plan and priorities for CAP, I thought that was, Chuck, I thought you said you were going to lead that group.
Interim. I was an interim appointee from the, and I have acted upon that mission by
By sending an email to us.
By the singular member of that subcommittee sent an email with actions done last week. So,
Okay.
anyway, more formally, I don't know that there is a structure, I don't know that there's a subcommittee, but I did take action, so, myself. But, and I know you had done some work, John, and we just need to have a meeting of minds and move this along. But I'd be more than happy to have anybody who wants to meet, we'll set up a meeting and do it. So I'm seeking wisdom from the rest of the commission.
I think when we had the updated information from Josh with the new emissions stuff from DTE, we'll be in a position to make some, at least refine the solar goals and perhaps set some realistic energy efficiency goals.
Yep, I agree, but
My personal sense is that two can run in parallel. I don't know that we need the goals necessarily right away. My sense is that what we really need to do in this group is to take the work that goes back now a year and a half ago, was revised in the fall of last year, was updated with some information that Josh, Nate, and Matt presented in the Ann Arbor Climate Partnership meeting. I'm talking about this document right here. Overarching efforts, multifamily, single family, et cetera, commercial, industrial, and that we need to work on that. And we need to, Councilman Eaton's point, say specifically what money is going to what sub-program, what are we going to view as outcomes, what are going to be the targets for those outcomes. And I think right now, those don't necessarily have to be tied to specific goals. For example, if we set a new goal of, I'm going to just pull a number out of the air, instead of 24 million megawatts of solar, we say we only need 15 or we need 45. In either case, we need a huge program for solar, and we don't have anything right now. So I think that the goals are relevant, and when we finally marry the two and set the dollar amounts and things like that, then we'll need them. But I think we have a lot of work to do before we need to have absolute cap-derived targets.
so here's a question. Who owns CAP, and can we, as the commission, take ownership of it? Because it doesn't have a commission that leads that effort, and update it, simplify it, make it crystal clear what we're trying to go to, and then when we have a request for dollars from commission, we can cite a certain line item right out of the darn thing, and we're ready to go.
Yeah,
I think it makes sense. And it can merge whatever was done by the partnership, or whatever that group was working on it, with other inputs, and get it moving. But I don't think we have to wait for numbers from DT.
We don't need a new cap. We need a revision and reprioritization of the 84 actions. And that's what we have.
That's a
right now.
revision
We
of
have
cap.
3 actions. And maybe we need 5, maybe we need 2. But I don't think we need to review all 84.
So right now, the commission's approved cap as it stands. That's what
The
exists.
cap and the targets are pretty clear. It's just what programs and what actions do we enact and what priorities. And we had 84, and none of which were prioritized. They were not force ranked. They were ranked in the sense of what the impact is on metric tons of CO2 reduced. But in terms of on a value proposition or things like that, that's not defined in the actions. And that's what we basically need to do, is say, looking at those 84 things that have developed in the meantime, what are we going to work on?
Okay, all right. We'll park that thought. The $75,000 that's in this year's budget, where does that go? Is that part of this? Is there a
Yeah, can we have
consultant
some
that we're gonna
of
hire
this?
to do this? So how do we do that? I mean, it's right now we have money, right? Or we will?
No, we will.
We don't
Yeah.
have money.
So,
We will in fiscal year 19.
So who will write the RFP for the consultant to help us go to the next step?
Well, if it's less than $25,000, I mean, we still probably need an RFP, but doesn't have to go to council at least. Again, I think,
there's 75.
my sense is that these are things that we probably need to discuss in the
Yeah.
working session.
Yes, I agree. Solar, I think we should mention that we've, would you like to talk about it, Mark?
sure,
How
there's
about-
group of people who, myself and Wayne and Matt Nod and John and Josh and Emily have met to kind of look at the best pieces of the previous solar program that happened last year, and to come up with ideas of how to launch a new effort that would meet a number of important criteria that we think are important, and to begin discussions with some potential partners to make that happen, including Michigan Saves. So there is sort of a draft discussion piece that's on the table that Michigan Saves is considering, and we're all considering, and the hope is that coming out of that document will be a proposal that will go to city administrator, which will basically outline a comprehensive program for a multi-sector program for solar and energy efficiency that will include Michigan Saves financing, a stable of pre-qualified, certified contractors, so that the city doesn't have to get in the business of picking contractors, and that program will be run out of the energy office, and the city will contribute staff time, and Michigan Saves will cover everything else. And everybody will kind of jump in, and we'll make this happen. There'll be hopefully room for volunteers, and I will volunteer accordingly. So that's where we're at. I'd say in a month we should have something, right, Josh?
Good, yes.
So it sounds like you guys have a lot of ideas and some plans in place. Are you planning on bringing a detailed plan, like drafting a detailed plan to bring to the commission? Or what?
So the directions we got from the city administrator was he wants a proposal for a program, and it needs to meet certain criteria. And so that's what we've been working around to see how to put that kind of thing together. Very, yes.
We could certainly endorse that program. It has to come back
Right.
from Michigan Saves first,
Right.
because they're the principal entity involved.
Right.
And so they have to agree to those terms before we should endorse it.
My says it'll come to him. He will turn to his person, Josh. Josh will bring it to us, and we'll bring it here. That's what I assume is going to happen. Hopefully, we don't miss the entire solar season again this year in doing this process. I had hoped that we would have been having this conversation 3 months ago. Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Okay.
I think your question is different, though, and that is the proposal going to run through the commission, or is it going to be put together by a few commissioners and other miscellaneous people, staff, and central, et cetera, and just go directly to the city? I think that's really your question.
Yes. Thank you.
And my recommendation is that we bring it through the commission, but the problem with that is that it's likely to take more time. I mean, it was just pointed out, if we go through the commission, the next commission meeting is a working session. That means we wouldn't be able to vote on anything. That means it wouldn't officially go to the city until sometime in July. And that means by the time contracts or MOUs or whatever are drawn up and we have a program, it's August, and that means we've missed the solar season.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily, in the interest of expediting, I don't want to, say that we insist it comes back to the commission for a vote, but just at some point in the process, come back to the commission as here's what's happening.
Well, the other alternative that I'll throw out is that we could decide to have the June session be a formal session and either make July the working session or decide to have actually a working session, an extra meeting. if we felt that it was important to get working on stuff with a working session, and that it was important to pass a few things, we could either have 2 different nights, or we could have a longer session. I mean, there's not anybody waiting to use this room. And so we could have a formal session and then follow it with a working session.
Right. And deal with that in the formal section, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just have to make the proper notifications ahead of time. So, when we find out the timeline on this, I would assume that Michigan Saves would get back to us in a couple of weeks.
Well, Josh, and Nate met with Michigan Saves
Yesterday.
yesterday.
Oh,
So, we're in real-time mode.
And we're going to at least discuss the status at a high level with the administrator tomorrow.
oh, so maybe it's moving too fast. Or not too fast,
Well-
too fast to
We don't expect to get any kind of go-ahead. What we expect, I think, I'll speak for myself, because Matt obviously will have input too, but the administrator has expressed 2 primary concerns, which we think are now addressed in the latest draft. One is that the city does not pick installers, distributors, anybody that's really interfacing directly with residents or commercial entities in the city, and the other is staff time. And we think both of those are now addressed, but there are some other issues that still need to be clarified. Some of those were discussed yesterday. I don't know if we need to get into any details, but so we're going to at least run those by him to see if indeed the path that we're on with Michigan Saves. One was also, what is Michigan Saves? He wasn't very clear on what Michigan Saves was as an entity, and we now have that worked also into the draft. So I think what we want to accomplish tomorrow, which doesn't preclude then us talking about this in June, is are his basic concerns addressed in the latest draft? And if they are, then we can refine that draft and go forward and present something formally. And we could do that through a June meeting.
Do you know whether or not this has to go through legal?
He indicated before that he thought that it did.
Well,
I
then
think
we have plenty of time.
Mary indicated an MOU was not necessary, and that we could actually even just start to do things even without a contract or an MOU between the city and Michigan States.
They're being very good, because they're gonna be spending money on their side of the table,
yeah.
trusting that we're gonna follow through.
Okay, well, keep us all abreast of this, and we'll figure out within 2 weeks before the next meeting exactly what that next meeting is gonna be. Because I think isn't that the time that we have to work on for proper announcements? Moving on down the list.
I'm just going to say one other thing about solar. We had a community solar meeting about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. As you saw also today, as well as from the presentation from Northville Steam, there's pretty good progress on solar on public schools. There's a good progress also on the Solar Faithful. We've got formal input from both DTE and from Acadia Power on their program and how their program compares to others using certain criteria that we've set up. But in terms of really having an offering to go to city residents for community solar, that's several months away, maybe a half a year probably. And it would just simply be not a recommendation because of the lessons learned from the Ann Arbor Solar Club, but more something like, these are vendors that we are aware of. We have queried them as far as what their offerings are. Here are our offerings. We encourage you to look into this, but we can't recommend anybody.
Right.
That's all, sorry.
Great, no, thank you. Ordinances. I don't think we've had a meeting on ordinances.
No. I
So-
put on my to-do list, I'm sending out an email I've been sitting on though. I'll
Okay.
send out tonight or
That's
tomorrow.
wonderful. Outreach for schools, Carlene isn't here. We've kind of talked about and seen the presentation. It's wonderful that that stuff is going on, and The Ann Arbor Public Schools has just formed a sustainability committee. And so they are actually very interested in moving ahead on solar and energy efficiency. And so that's really good news. Energy efficiency cap, we kind of talked about that. Report from the Environmental Commission.
So the last commission meeting was devoted almost entirely to 2 points, one of which was the resolution that we also considered, and the other was a presentation given by Administrator Lazarus on essentially the fiscal 19 budget, some preliminary figures, the fact that revenues continue to grow at a slower rate than expenditures, some of the plans relative to the new Office of Sustainability. The presentation should be on the website for the Environmental Commission. I encourage you to take a look at it. There's nothing that I think is worth going into detail here, especially after almost 2.5 hours. So.
Great, thank you. Public input, seeing no public, we'll call public input closed. Items for the next agenda.
Is this a working session that we're talking about, or?
Maybe?
The Solar for All program.
Okay.
I think we should also have an honest discussion about committees and subcommittees, and if we're going to have them, what expectations are roughly in terms of membership. We can't have a subcommittee of one. I think also in terms of how often they meet, and I think we also have to have an honest discussion about what work, quote unquote, is done through the commission, what work is done in smaller groups. There's also the Ann Arbor Climate Partnership that is meeting and discussing a lot of these things, and so we have either gaps or duplicity or misunderstandings potentially between those various groups. And I think there are probably some individuals, commissioners included, that probably feel left out of what's going on in some cases, or at least not informed, not fully informed. At the same time, right now, most of the work is getting done in ways and means outside of the commission. So we probably need to have a discussion on how we operate going forward.
That's a good idea.
Good idea.
Okay, and I think we were going to look at those priorities list,
Capstone.
examine that. So,
Yes.
and I think that's more than enough to talk about. So, I'll entertain a motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
24 after 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're out of here. Good session, folks.